Well, it's March 30, 2020, and 192 of 195 countries are currently infected with the coronavirus, according to this website. But that means a lot of schools are now online. Teachers are at home, students are at home, and learning is happening through the computer. Now, a lesson that you conduct online is different to a lesson you conduct face-to-face. Now, I've been in schools for nearly 30 years, and I've been working in technology for almost all of them. So here's my take on the anatomy of an online lesson. Let's lay it out on the table. First, you have your whole lesson. You have the start and the end. Any good lesson begins with an introduction, and typically that's a teacher-focused or teacher-centered part of the lesson. You introduce the concepts, you go over things from previous lessons. That's the teacher directing things. Then you have the body of the lesson, and this is typically the part that is student-centered. They're actually interacting with the content or the concepts that you've introduced in the introduction. They're working on that, and then you get to the end of the lesson and you have an exit ticket, some form of formative assessment. And this is really crucial when you're teaching an online lesson, because you do not have the ability to walk around and see what the kids are doing in your classroom. You must have some way of knowing that they've been following your content, that they've been working on the material that you've been asking them to do, and that they've understood what it is you've needed them to understand. Let's talk a little bit now about the introduction section of your online lesson. Ideally, it should be no more than a third of the whole time that you're online together. And again, ideally, it should be spent discussing, interacting with, engaging in a topic that the students have come to the session prepared with. So that means, previous to this online session, you've set your students some work to do. Maybe it's a reading, maybe it's a video to watch, maybe it's some sort of activity that they've had to engage in. You've sent that through whatever content management system you're using, Google Classroom, Moodle, Seesaw, or one of the myriad of other platforms that schools are using. So the introduction is where you address that material that the students have been reviewing previously and either expand upon or engage students in, have them ask questions, answer their questions, share their concerns, to then expand upon to lead into the learning objectives for the rest of your online session. So that piece that you are really kicking off the lesson, engaging in the content that you set from the night before, and then introducing the new concept should be, ideally, no more than a third of the lesson. That is the introduction. And now we come to the body of the lesson. This is where the student-centered activities really begin. The introduction has given students an opportunity to ask questions, clarifying questions about the material they were asked to engage with previous to the session. But now it's an opportunity for the students to take on the new material that was introduced in the introduction, coming from the previously engaged in material. And there must be some activities for students to actually engage in and do. Listening is not doing. Taking notes as they're listening is a form of doing, but it's very low level engagement. Ideally, the body is where the teacher is giving the students an opportunity to do something, to engage in the new learning, to embed that somehow in their understanding through an activity that they need to do while the online session is happening. While the students are doing this activity, the teacher is still online and is still able to help students. Students should be able to ask questions exactly as they would as if they were in a classroom and were working on something, and the teacher was strolling around the classroom offering assistance. The same thing applies in an online session. Ideally, the body of the lesson is the time where students spend, again, the bulk of, nearly 2/3 of the lesson engaging in the material. Now, of course, a teacher can stop the class, bring them all together, clarify some understanding, introduce a new concept, and then keep them going. But for the bulk of this time, students should be doing something. Not just listening, but doing. Which leads us to the exit ticket. The final section of your online lesson is really the most important, because this last exit ticket stage of the lesson is where you involve the students in some formative assessment. And really, it's so crucial, because in an online setting, you don't know what's going on the other side of the screen. If you're using Zoom or Google Meet or something like that, you can see who's joined your session. You can see their names, and maybe from time to time you've interacted with a handful of them. Maybe they've used their video, maybe not. But during the lesson, you're not really certain what's happening. So it's really important that you get an understanding of what your students have understood, because when you finish this lesson, you are going to assign them some reading or a video or some activity to prepare for the next lesson. So you need to know what it is you need to present them with. And the best way to do that is through some formative assessment. And one of the easiest ways to do that is through an online form. There's plenty of those available. Google Forms offer a very simple alternative if you are using Google Apps for education, but you could use SurveyMonkey or anything like that to create a simple or not so simple form for your students to complete. So you may have that prepared beforehand, or that is also something you could be putting together through the body of the lesson as students are asking you questions. You could build that form, that formative assessment through the lesson based on the misconceptions or the questions or the learning that has happened during the body of the lesson. And that can be done very quickly and very simply. And then in that last, say, 5 or 10 minutes of your session, you would copy the link to that form, paste it into the chat of whatever software you're using, and send that to the students. And that would be the final task of the lesson. And you make it clear to the students that when they're done with that, the lesson is over. But if they have some questions, they could stay online and ask you whatever it is that they're wondering about as the lesson concludes. But again, I cannot emphasize enough how important that formative assessment is at the end of every online session. You as the teacher really need to know what the students have understood from the last 45 minutes, hour, however long the session has been. Really, really crucial. So there we have it, the anatomy of an online lesson. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask. You'll find all my information in the section below. And have a great online session. Bye now.